All right. How's everybody doing? This is my case presentation on a case I currently have at the mental health clinic I'm interning at. And for all intents and purposes, we'll call this kid Johnny. Right. So before I get into it here, I got a trigger warning. This case deals heavily with child abuse and domestic abuse, physical abuse, stuff like of that nature. So if you're sensitive to that stuff, these are all randomly assigned, but maybe get in touch with the professor or something like that. All right. So describing Johnny here. Johnny's 5 years old, average height and weight for his age. Um, but the peculiar thing about Johnny here is he has above average intelligence and exhibits high levels of Machiavellianism. So what do I mean by that? High levels of intelligence, probably like more of a raw IQ than obviously a knowledge base. Like I said, he's five. So he doesn't have a giant knowledge base to draw onto, but he is able to maneuver quite well in social situations. And if you're not familiar with the term of Machiavellianism, it's a term I know quite well because I was part of this research project in undergrad who looked at Machiavellianism in child abuse victims. And basically, what it is, if you're not familiar with Machiavelli, the big takeaway with a lot of his books, The Prince and so on, is that the end justifies the means, and that's often at any cost. So, what does that sort of translate to in this term? I got a nice little image in the bottom here. Few emotional attachments, inappropriate social behaviors, or at least what we view as inappropriate social behaviors, cynical views of human behavior, obsessed with powers, and lacks empathy. So, and that's also like there's kind of connotations of like emotional coldness, duplicity, and like aggressiveness kind of sprinkled in there as well. And these are all mainly true. So, what does someone who exhibits high levels of Machiavellianism able to do? They're able to manipulate really well, navigate social situations really well. And what it sort of looks like with this kid is like maybe he'll instigate a fight between two other children at his daycare. And oh, why did you do that? Because I didn't like that kid and I wanted this toy he had. So when I made them fight, I took the toy. Stuff like that. Stuff that's you don't particularly see like a 5-year-old sort of do. I have another 5-year-old client. He's not quite on this level. He's still figuring out very basic fundamental things while this kid's doing stuff of that nature. So anyway, he's very social and displays heightened self-awareness. So like I said, some examples of that is I did this because of this. They might go, why'd you get sad earlier? Well, I got sad because I wanted this, which, that's something more usually older kids do, but um you'll see this little 5-year-old. He was four originally he just turned 5, 4 originally when I first had him. You'll see him do stuff like that. But he loves making friends, loves talking. But again, is that, something he likes to do, or is that something he sees as the ends justify the means? Like this is gonna be useful for me, so I'm gonna do it for now. So he also currently attends daycare, which is across the street through the same company I do work at the clinic with, and he has limited visitation with his biological parents. Currently enjoys playing with superhero action figures, cards, and robots, and lives with his foster family, including two first-time parents in their early 20s. They're a little bit younger than me. I guess they came into custody of these children because some affiliation with the church and um, something like that. They're kinda hard to get in touch with sometimes, so, the story's not too clear on that, but they are younger. Foster dad does, like, Uber Eats or something. Foster mom works, I think, at a different daycare or something like that. And then he's also currently living with his biological sister who's 3, um, and yeah. Anyway, this family lives in a small ranch-style home, very, very small house with 2 dogs in, like, a very rural sort of in the country, but not quite. I think it's one of those places that's considered either like a town or village, so it's rather small. Um, yeah. So a little backstory: he was removed from his biological parents' homes for neglect and abuse. This includes indirect exposure to drugs, alcohol, domestic abuse, and firearms. So something a little more description about that, without getting too into the details there. He's like, he'll tell me, oh, my mom had this thing and it looks like this, and he'll go like this a lot, and I'm like, oh, did you see that on YouTube? Did you see that at school? He goes, no, my mom had one, and I go, okay, draw me the gun, and he'll draw a real gun. I go, oh, did she ever shoot it? And he'll go, yeah, and I go, oh, well, what did it sound like? Bang, 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 and he'll be really loud. And he's sort of I kind of came to the determination there that he had in fact been exposed to a real firearm, and drugs and alcohol. He'll talk about needles. He'll talk about how his dad drinks beer. Very weird stuff for a 5-year-old. Like, maybe they might mention beer, but he's able to distinguish, oh, my dad had a big beer, my dad had a beer in a can, my like he's it's not typically something a kid knows. Like, maybe they might know, oh, it's a beer bottle, but they don't know this kid knew about the difference between liquor and alcohol, and which one he didn't like his parents on more at 5 years old. Again, very weird. um, yeah, and then the domestic abuse part, mom and dad used to get into quite a few fights. He used to slam doors on her head, knock her over, punch her, hit her, and do the same thing to him too. And the other like very big thing I learned out not too long ago was supposedly when Child and Family Services came to take him and his sister away from the biological parents, he's kept in a wooden cage in the attic for who knows how long, while he was living with these parents. And he hasn't really elaborated on it. I don't know if it was like more of a punishment thing, more of a why is it in the attic, which is just kind of weird to begin with. But they did in fact have this cage they found him in, locked in the attic, before he lived with the foster family. And so, and supposedly too, something else I learned maybe a month ago is that he was in foster care before. It's kind of hard to get these records for some reason. I put in like a request for him, and I still haven't gotten them back. A lot of it's kind of been like word of mouth. But yeah, apparently he was in child. He was removed from um, living with his biological parents in the past. And the weird thing about it too is, like I said, his sister's 3 years old. So imagine that, what he was removed at 2, so was removed before he knew his mother was pregnant, and then he comes back, right, to this fresh baby, and he's like, I didn't even know my mom was pregnant, and here's this, brand new baby. So, obviously this is going to come into play later more, but the situations with abuse from his father inflicted upon him included some fisted blows to the abdomen, being punched in the stomach, and then like hard open hand slaps, on the face, which bruised. And there were pictures. And again, he did witness his mom being abused. In addition to the physical abuse, dad used to hold knives to her neck. He used to come at her with a knife, joking. I think he smashed a bottle on her and then jumped off. He told me he like, this could be completely made up too, but obviously I try to believe the reality that the client has, even if he's 5 and pretty imaginative. But yeah, he told me there was a story, dad jumped off of a couch and then picked up the couch and hit mom with it, like WWE style. I don't know. Something of that nature. I got him to draw it, and it was very confusing. So, some factors contributing to the crisis. So obviously this case is a pretty complicated one. And so you might be like, oh, the crisis already happened. Well, it gets worse. So originally they saw these services here at the clinic due to behavioral manifestations relating to increased Machiavellianisms, fixations involving hurting others. So, Machiavellianism, I think more or less, it doesn't explicitly mean you're going to hurt others, but this is like, he's like, I want to kill my sister. I want to kill this dog. He really doesn't like the dogs at this foster family's house. He like stabs them with forks. Like poke them with knives for like eating like butter knives or kid knives or whatever, not like actual knives. But yeah. And he's talked about like killing other children and stuff. Doesn't really show a lot of different emotions. He might be happy, might be sad, but most of the time he's very just like hyper and just kind of neutral. But when he gets jealous, it's like a completely different kid. He gets very angry. It's almost like night and day, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde type stuff. So yeah, and then when you talk to him, hey, why did you do X, Y, and Z? Why are you talking about, hurting people? He won't talk about why. He'll just go, I wanted to. And when you talk about, well, why would you want to? doesn't really go into much detail there. So it's kind of hard. And again, he's 5, so he might not have the cognitive ability to sort of, excuse me, rationalize that. So, and he just says, talking about utilizing here, I want to, and it is shown that he can manipulate others. And reports intent behind these actions. Again, I did this to get that. Machiavellianism, very classic. And the main person he sort of fixates on hurting is his sister. He always talks about killing his sister. I kind of think it's a jealousy thing. Other clinicians who are kind of familiar with him think it's a jealousy thing, but I'm not 100% sold on that theory, but it's probably the most plausible one. But the weird thing is he also doesn't like when any other person picks on her, says that he loves her. Oh, I love her. I don't want to be apart from her, stuff like that. I've asked him explicitly, do you want to live with your sister? Yes or no? Yes. Why? Because I love her. Why? Because I want to be around her. So it might be like a weird trauma bonding thing too, or like some weird cognitive thing, the way he understands relationships, seeing his mother and his father. Obviously that's got to mess with your brain in some way. But um, the weird thing here, the big most influential piece of this crisis is the foster parents, after all this stuff, psychological warfare type stuff in the household with this 5-year-old child, they're like, okay, the sister's unsafe, she's come back with cuts, bruises, bite marks from this kid. And obviously the main idea here is you might be thinking at this point, oh, maybe it's negligence. They're not watching this kid. No, they are. This kid's sneaking out of the bed. When they're taking baths, like they might turn around to grab a bar of soap and he's already bitter, like crazy amounts of stuff. Like I've ruled out negligence just because it's like the level of supervision they're giving these kids is pretty good. But it's in these little moments that he finds it in the car, right? You can't keep them separated in the car unless you have like a minivan, but he's finding ways to do this. So yeah, that's the big thing there to keep in mind. And then, so where are we at with this crisis? Like I said, they're talking about getting him a placement away from the sister due to the sister's safety. And after he learned this, they started to tell him, we might have to find you a different thing. He started getting really irritable. But he hasn't fully processed that. He still thinks he's gonna live with the sister, but at the same time, he's like, yeah, I might. And so the part where this has gotten kind of hard with the parents, where me and them have sort of butted heads, is that they've sort of used it as this weird punishment thing in their house. Let's say Johnny does something bad and they're like, all of a sudden, hey Johnny, if you keep doing that, you're not going to live with this, you're not going to live with your sister anymore. And you might be like, oh, okay, maybe they can stop it. No, they've already like put in the paperwork. They said even if he did a complete 180, they're still sending him anyway. So it's kind of like ethically, it's probably not the best thing in the world. But I kind of understand why they're doing it, because that I see it as a way they're just grasping any attempt to get this kid to act normal for the remainder of time while they have him. But like I said, it's probably not the most ethical approach. So, like I said, up to this point, Johnny's learned that he's going to be removed from the house and he's acting crazy. So what does this look like? This acting crazy, loss of progression in session, and significant regression. Not to rhyme too much there, but what does that look like? Maybe he was talking to me a bit at first, opening up about his parents. Now nothing, absolutely nothing. And then, maybe he wasn't doing some weird stuff. He was just kind of like fixating on hurting his sister here and there, maybe hurting her a little. Same with the dogs. Now it's every day. Any chance he gets, he is. And another weird thing too is he started like peeing and pooping all around the house. In retaliation, they take toys, he poops on like curtains and wipes his butt on them, and then I've tried to get to the bottom of this, where are you learning this, and nothing. He'll he pees in his sister's tea sets, he'll pee in the dog's bowl, pee all over the bathroom. But this is like, I should mention too, that a lot of these behaviors are very specific to the household. The peeing and pooping has never been anywhere else, not a daycare. Same with like, for a long time too, he wasn't threatening to hurt other kids outside of his sister. Until recently, with this crisis, he wasn't talking about hurting his classmates. He loved his classmates. But now after this crisis, I guess the big difference here is, it's kind of indiscriminate a bit more, but there is still a preference to the sister. So, and then, like I said, continues to harm his sister and animals with no regard for the permanency of his actions. He doesn't think like, how do I put this in a way that makes sense? like, before this, he was like, kind of had the idea that he could just get away scot free because what's the worst they can do? They can take his toys. But now it's a lot more critical. It's gonna not only is he getting a different placement, but it could vary, right? So some of the ones they're thinking about is just a different family, but also like inpatient services. But it's kind of hard because there's not really any inpatient services in this area for 5-year-olds. So, and I've tried explaining it to him, but again, he's 5. He might not get it. He's very smart, but he's not that smart. Um, so doesn't, and again, doesn't show any remorse for his actions in session, but recognizes he shouldn't do them. Do you think this is good or bad? It's bad. Why do you do it? Because I want to. Okay. Do you think you should do it? No. Why do you do it? Because I want to. Stuff like that. Sometimes it's kind of like talking towards a wall or recording. You sort of get like the same answers after a while. And again, it's hard to I find it very hard to work with kids like this, and because they're not able to fully understand and have the cognitive ability to really dig deep. But again, obviously I try. Um and then sometimes too, another weird thing is this is a common reaction, I guess, in kids anyway. But when you try to get him to dig deep, and he does sometimes, he'll talk about mom, and dad and how they're heading, or maybe they're missing visitation visits, and then he'll go home and he'll just, I guess, he turns into like this crazy child off the chain, like ADHD type behavior, uncontrollably, like explosive sort of ADHD, and he gets like super angry, irritable for a couple days. Maybe he'll hit the sister, foster dad, foster mom, whatever. Um, and then the big thing too is, he's expressed intent, plans, and means for future harm directed to sister. When I think when I'm gonna go home, I'm gonna hit my sister with this big Lego thing I'm gonna make. I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna get her to play Legos, and then I'm gonna take this Lego thing and I'm gonna drop it right on her head. And he'll talk about stuff like that. Obviously, I report it to the father, but it's kind of weird because like if an adult said something like this, obviously like there would be a lot more to do, but this is a 5-year-old child, so there's only, again, so much you can do, so much resources available for this age group. So sort of getting and analyzing it a bit more here. The role, obviously, the services he gets through us is psychotherapy with me, and then with the psychiatric provider, they're like they do like some light psychotherapy, but they're also like considering meds. Um, so that's inherently directive, since it's more or less us trying to educate them, psychoeducation, but it's collaborative too. What are some ways we can not get so mad? What are some things we can do when we're mad that won't get us in trouble? Even trying to like reward him a bit. So, and then although he has this heightened intelligence, he struggles with non-directive approaches. Maybe think of the next time you're in this situation, think of 3 ways you can do something. Three things you can do where you are, and do those instead. He can't like I think that might be a cognitive thing again. Like he can't. It's one thing to remember to do it as a kid. It's another thing to do it independently. So it's hard with this kid, but he does do good with the collaborative attempts at strengthening social skills and coping skills through modeling and role play. So, I've had the sister in session and I'm like, okay, now, I'll have the sister take something or like make them mad. And then I'll go, okay, now what do we do? And I'll walk through each step with them, and it works good in session. And then they go home and it doesn't work. It just doesn't stick. He doesn't want to. The sister does good with it, but the motivation piece isn't quite there. I've tried motivating it, prizes, rewards, things he likes, doesn't work. Because I think maybe he thinks he'll get them anyways, even though he doesn't. Tried explicitly explaining it to him, doesn't work. And he's been with me and the doctor he sees for who he originally saw for his psychiatric evaluation, sort of sees for on the side there through us. He's been seeing us for 4 months, but the sort of understanding here is that he's only probably going to see us till September going forward, and I'm only there till August. So it's going to be short term in the best case here. So the ideal resolution here would be have him, Johnny, come to terms with that he's moving, that he's going to be away from his sister, that he's probably not going back with his parents, in a way that's not gonna make it worse and worse and worse. Because like, while I feel like this is pretty bad, and I don't feel like this is as bad as this kid can get 100%, but it is pretty bad. So some things that could exacerbate or make the effects of this worse could be the foster parents' reluctance to listen to suggestions and the foster parents' lack of transparency. And at this point, you're probably like, "Oh, Noah, why haven't you talked to the parents?" Oh, I have. They just don't agree with what I have to say. Even if I try to put it light, or try to educate them, I'll print out articles, give it to them, homework, whatever. They don't care. And I get it's probably like a rural new parent, like uneducated thing. This is what my parents do. This is what I'm gonna do. I get that, but I haven't made a lot of progress with that, and some factors that might prevent this crisis from recurring could include, the fact that he's pretty smart, the ability to process, even though he probably doesn't want to, and then any interventions maybe that me or the doctor could utilize, and then commitment towards meaningful change. Maybe something flips. Maybe he, like a monkey growing a big enough brain to solve a puzzle. Like maybe one day cognitively he gets there. Maybe that's all that's holding him back from processing this. So, and then he's like, okay, now I'm committed because I realize now cognitively that I'm going to get what I want by doing these things, or it's ethical to do these things, so I should. So the questions I have here at the end, um, what should the focus of future sessions be outside of minimizing the effect of the crisis? So I only have like 2 months with this kid left. Um, Obviously, harm reduction approach, right? This is pretty iffy for everyone involved. So I'm dealing with the fallout first. But let's say we get through the fallout, I make no progress with it. He understands it, but he doesn't want to work on it. What do I work on? So processing previous trauma, peer relations with his sister, parents, whatever, maybe we can strengthen those. Or, emotional regulation. What does this emotion look like? Because there's times like where I'll go, draw how you feel when you're hurting someone. He'll draw a smile. And I go, how do you feel when you're hurting someone? Happy. And I'm like, okay, are you really happy? And it's like sort of like an emotional dysregulation, right? Sometimes he'll be actually sad, but he'll be smiling. You see it sometimes with autistic kids, like they'll be smiling even though somebody's making fun of them, and they understand that somebody's making fun of them. It's like a weird emotional dysregulation, though. And then question number 2 here: if relocation wasn't a certain element in this case, what course of action would you suggest to preserve the safety of the clients, his family, and his own mental well-being? So I guess sort of wording this a bit more simply, if he's not moving, what should we do? What harm reduction approach again? What should we focus on first to keep everyone as safe as they can? I've done a safety plan, so I've put out the basic structure, but what's something maybe we can incorporate that I'm not thinking of? Like sometimes, like maybe getting a baby camera could be something good, something like that. Like I'm looking for sort of an out of the box idea for shifting the accountability more on the parents and not having it be more like, well, they're sleeping and I can't watch them at 12 o'clock at night, which is understandable. But what's a creative solution? Like for instance, I guess a good example would be my other 5-year-old kid I see at the clinic has separation anxiety from his parents. So what did I do? They got those like relationship bracelets. I don't know if you've seen them. You press the button on it and then it vibrates the bracelet on the other hand, and vice versa. Your girlfriend could press her button and it's gonna vibrate your bracelet just so they're there. So yeah, I'm looking for any creative sort of solution like that. All right, and that's my presentation. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope it was okay, because not gonna lie, this is my last semester, and the motivation I have for doing these is like at an all-time low. So yeah, thanks.